What's going on, y'all? It is Monday, January 16th, Martin Luther King Day. And me and Pops are in the shop. It is Monday afternoon, sometime a little after lunch. We've been working on the chassis this morning, or today. And we didn't film anything, but we haven't gone far. So I picked up the phone so I could record and show a little bit about what we're doing. Right now we're bolting stuff on the front end. And what we're going to do is just concentrate on getting the front end done and finished, and then we'll go to the rear end and get it finished, and then we'll work in between. So I'll turn y'all around and show y'all what we got going on. All right, as y'all can see, we got our steering box bolted on, idler arm bolted on, and our drag link bolted in. It's not tight yet. We just kind of got it sitting in there, looking at everything and checking clearances and stuff. We were chasing these threads where we painted. We were chasing them with an old jack bolt. We don't have a 1" 8 tap. So we've got an old jack bolt that we keep. And really, to be honest with you, it probably works better than a tap because a tap will try to cut more. And an old jack bolt will kind of just go in there and clean the threads out. So we chased the threads with an old jack bolt. And I'll show y'all on the jack bolt. On these swivel cups, I know a lot of people like to run these. AFCO makes them. Different companies make them. I'm sure the same people probably make them for everybody. But anyway, we like to run these swivel cups, and they're good pieces for the money. These came from Bryke Racing. I think they're like $35 a piece. But one thing we've noticed in the past with these swivel cups, and a lot of people will just take these out of the plastic and they'll put them on their chassis and not even look at them. Now, I haven't touched this one, but I can promise you it's going to be just like. Matter of fact, Pops is taking one out of the plastic right now. And if he'll bring that over here, I'll show you exactly what I'm about to talk about. Sit it down on there. He just took this one out of the plastic. Now, I barely have 2 fingers on this. And that's how loose. Well, this one they actually got tight. I'm gonna eat my words. They got this one tight. Now this one, I noticed earlier, see, those bolts are loose. And they're just little short Allen head bolts that screw in. They're real short. So what we like to do, we like to take these apart, and they do grease them from the factory. They got some grease on them. But we like to put a little more grease on that ball right there because it's got a Teflon in here that it rides on. But Loctite, red Loctite. You'll thank me later. I'm sure a lot of y'all already know this. So we just Loctite these little bolts back in these holes when we put grease on them. And that just assures that little added security they won't come out. We're going to work on these jack bolts. We're going to work on getting them in the chassis. We've got lower control arms, but we can't put them on yet because lower ball joints and lower control arm bushings will be here tomorrow. So y'all hang out with us. I'm going to set the camera up. We're going to work on these jack bolts, and we're going to get them put in their holes where they're supposed to be. Y'all hang out with us. All right, well, we got the front jack bolts in, 5/8, and we do have some lock nuts to go on those, so don't worry about that. There will be lock nuts on those when we go to put this thing together. But we just wanted to get them in because we had them, and as y'all seen, we struggled with this one over here a little bit. It had some stuff in the threads, and y'all seen me run both of them in with the impact. And I know people are gonna say don't do that, but I'm doing it real slow. It may look fast on camera, but we're just barely running it up with the little impact, so it ain't hurting nothing. So we got the jack bolts in for the front, steering on. Tomorrow when our bushings come in, we'll get our lower control arms on with the ball joints in them. We actually got rid of our Pinto spindles because we're actually going to go to a different spindle. And when they come in, I'll show you what we're going to be running. It's just a 3-piece spindle. It's the Pacer spindles. A lot of guys are going to them, so we figured we'd try them. And yeah, that's where we're at. We're starting to put this jewel together now. What do you think?
Well, as long as we just keep slowly putting her together, one piece at a time, make sure everything's right.
That's right. We like to take our time on this process. We know we don't have the nicest equipment, but if anybody takes their time and does things right and second checks everything they do, you can take mediocre equipment and make it nice. So we're going to keep plugging away at this thing over the next few days, getting some stuff bolted on it. So y'all hang tight. We got a lot more to come. All right, y'all, what we're working on is getting our quickener mounted. And we're using the Howe quickener 2-to-1 stock metric box. This box right here is 14-to-1 from the factory. It's like a stock Monte Carlo, so it'll be 7-to-1 with the quickener. But we were getting it worked out to where we can come off the column up there and come into the quickener with a knuckle and mounted the quickener kind of flat, because we've got to come back to here, and we will have a bracket right here holding a heim that will stick out, and the shaft will come through that heim with a knuckle here, and it'll knuckle down to a knuckle on the steering box here, so it'll clear our control arm right here once we get all this bolted on. But yeah, that's what we're working on right now. Y'all hang out. We're gonna do some more work. All right, y'all. So what we done, we got our quickener mounted there, and I will gusset this plate and everything to the tube so it's stronger. But we're running a straight off of the quickener here, and we're gonna come straight into this heim, and we turn that quickener just a little bit offset, as you can see, compared to this bar right here. And what that does, it lines up with this steering box. So we're able, because we want to make sure we clear our control arm right here, because the control arm is going to stick out a little bit right here. We're going to run a straight right here like we did on the quickener, and let a piece of steering shaft come straight up above the control arm. Then we'll run a knuckle right in here somewhere behind the jack bolt, and our steering shaft to go through the oversized heim right here, and that'll be for stability for this knuckle out here, because we're not too far out past the heim, so it'll keep all this supported and running a straight here and a straight on the quickener that allows the rigidity of the shaft. And then we'll run a knuckle on the other side of the quickener up to another oversized heim in the cockpit, and that'll be our steering shaft. I know y'all are probably upset we ground all that pretty paint off, but we had to. We knew we didn't have the steering completely finished, but we wanted to go ahead and paint the chassis. It's no big deal. It can be touched up.
Have to work with the weather.
That's right. That's right. Well, we're moving along. We're getting this thing pieced together. Y'all hang out with us. We got a lot more to come. What's going on, y'all? It is Wednesday, January 18th. We are back in the shop this evening. We're working on the car some more. I just got here. It's kind of late. Well, I say kind of late. It's 7:30 right now, and I had to go work. Had another job after work this evening, so I just got down to the shop. Pop's been busy. It looks like he's got the lower control arms actually hanging in the car right there. So what we do, we use the steel low friction bushings like you see at Speedway or Bike Racing's, where we ordered these. And we put them in the control arms, and then we put the control arms in the chassis before we even tack weld or anything on these bushings. A lot of people will just slap these bushings in, and they'll weld them in as soon as they put them in, and they may not line up with the chassis. So we put them in the control arm, slide the control arm in the chassis, then tack them, pull them out, weld them good. And we'll probably do that this evening. He looks like he's got them hanging in there where they need to be, and I'll get the welder out, and we'll get to tacking some bushings in these control arms right here and get a little work done this evening. Y'all hang out with us. All right, so those are tacked in. Y'all saw me move the control arms up and down a few times after I tacked them. That's just to make sure they're moving freely. Obviously, the bolts aren't tight. So once we tighten up the bolts, a lot of times we will take a grinder and grind the outer part of those bushings, those steel bushings, and let the center sleeve be the only thing that gets tightened down on. You don't want to grind too much because you don't want the control arm to move front to back in the chassis, but we take just a hair off just to free them up a little bit. But what I had to do is on this back bolt right here, the washer was kind of off where they re-washered the mounts. They may have used like a monoball mount, and it had kind of had the washer off a little bit from the factory hole. Those monoball mounts, you know, have the spherical bearing in them that can move back and forth. So I think that's what they had in this car. I may be wrong, but that's what it seemed like. We have a rod that we use that is 1/2 inch diameter, and we stick it through the control arm mounts from the front to the back, all the way through, to make sure all that's lined up. And the passenger side, the right front, yesterday that rod went all the way through just fine. Yesterday when we done this side, it come through and hit this back washer right here. It went through the hole in the mount, it just hit the washer. So what Pop's done today is he cut that washer off while I was at work, and when I come in just then, I noticed that washer had been cut off, and he had a bolt sticking all the way through. So I just went ahead and put a new washer on, and that way all that's lined up the way it should be. It's just alignment that we always check. I would check it with any car. I mean, you know, you got, say you were building a street stock and you went and got a metric frame from the factory, from the junkyard, sorry, and you were going to put a cage on it and build it, you would want to take a rod and check the alignment of those holes, even though on a metric car, you'll have to drill them to 1/2 inch. And, because I think they're just under a 1/2 inch from the factory, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Take a 1/2 inch rod that's straight, solid piece of tubing, stick it through there. We made ours a T-handle. I think it's laying right there on that step right there. So we just take it and stick it through our mounts and make sure everything lines up right, and everything moves freely. So we'll pull these out. I've got them all tacked in now. I'll pull them out, take them over to the bench, and weld those bushings in good. And we'll get ready to bolt them back in. We've actually got the lower ball joints too, so we may go ahead and throw those back in, or throw those in. And we'll get busy on putting some more stuff on this thing. Y'all hang out with us. All right, y'all. As y'all can see, we got our bushings welded in, and we were discussing we're just gonna weld these on the outside. Before we welded them outside and inside, but if they turn with those two welds on there, we got bigger problems than welds, I promise you. So we're just gonna leave the insides like they are. That way it's easier to cut off if we ever have to cut them out. And word of advice, always make sure your grease fitting is down where you can get to it with the grease gun. Ain't that right?
That's right.
As y'all seen in the other one I was welding before this one, I tacked them in the car with the bushings turned the wrong way because I didn't pay attention. I just came in and Pops had them hanging in the car, and that's my fault for not checking. And well, y'all see me with the screwdriver. Y'all probably thinking now, well, he cut them loose and tacked them back, not in the car. And I know what y'all are going to say, well, they're not going to be right. But that's why we were using the screwdriver as a gauge, because the thickness of that screwdriver was exactly the gap we had in that bushing on that control arm. So we were using the screwdriver as a gauge. They should be really close. And we will buzz these right here with the grinder before we put them back in the chassis. Like I said, just to free up the bushing a little bit. But you don't want to do too much because you don't want the control arm going back and forth in the chassis. We just brush them with the pad, a sanding pad a little bit. And then we'll get them put back in after we get the ball joints put in them. And I just laid this one back over here in the floor. That way it'll be out of the way and it can cool off. And we'll let them cool off tonight. We'll come in tomorrow and throw some bushings in them. So that's how much we got done so far. We hung the brake pedals and all in it. I forgot to mention that earlier, but we're gonna do some looking right here. We may adjust these a little bit. They kind of tilt down a little bit, so we may have to washer this bracket right here and bring them back up level a little bit. So that's it for now. Until we get some more parts in here, we'll get these control arms put on with the lower ball joints in them. We'll let them go ahead and be hanging there, and then we'll get upper control arms and springs, and then the spindles come in. We'll be able to bolt all that together, and then hubs, and it'll be ready to, the front end will be ready to sit on the ground. And we'll get back to the back here, the rear end. We've got a rear end over here, a 9-inch that has bent pull bar brackets on it. We thought about straightening them up, and for now using it for a roll around rear end, just so we can get started on the sheet metal. And that's probably what we'll do. We may just throw some hubs on it, and that way we can roll the chassis. We can load it, carry it to Big Jake, let him do his metal work on the inside. At least get the tub in it and the front part of the decking done so we can run brake lines, electrical, and all that. So y'all hang out with us. We got a lot more to come.
Appreciate you watching. Everybody have a good day. God bless you.
All right, y'all. Like, comment, subscribe. Till next time, we'll see y'all.